He also played the Native American flute, and he was down beneath the stands one day before a game, relaxing, playing it, and he claims, that the flute got swatted out of his hands and flew like 5 feet. A lot of, security guards that we spoke with swore up and down that there were ghosts there, particularly Ty Cobb. He was the most talked about, presence, him running the bases at night to, encountering his presence in the hall or, hearing his voice. A surprising amount of players that had actual, first-hand stories or believed, that certain paranormal things were going on at either ballparks or spring training sites or hotels.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, Banal of America Audio with your host, Tim Banal.
What is going on, my friends? This is Tim Banal of BanalofAmerica.com with another edition of BoA Audio Season 6. Once again, big thanks to our buddy Ian for providing the theme music to this week's edition of the program. Stay tuned to future episodes of the show if you want to hear more tunes from BoA Audio listeners. And if you are a listener out there who has music you'd like to contribute to the program, shoot me a line at boaaudio@hotmail.com, and I'd be happy to give it a listen. Now, let's get down to business on this week's edition of the program. In fact, it is actually part one of 2 installments of the program you're going to be hearing this week from BoA Audio. It is the first half of our baseball doubleheader. Traditionally, we do the BoA Audio Baseball Special, which you'll be hearing in a few days. I'll talk more about that at the end of the program. Suffice it to say, it is jam-packed with esoteric stars. But I know that a lot of people skip the baseball special, so this year I wanted to try something a little bit different, and I wanted to really try and blend those 2 worlds together, the worlds of the paranormal and baseball. And I found the perfect guest for that on the program this week, Dan Gordon, the co-author with Mickey Bradley of 2 books, Haunted Baseball and Field of Screams. And both of those tomes share tales of ghostly encounters that they were told by various baseball players, whether they're legends or up-and-comers. And both books go beyond merely ghost stories and also delve into all kinds of stuff like curses, legends, rituals, and a whole bunch of other stuff like haunted hotels and stadiums. And that's sort of the areas we're going to be discussing here in this conversation. We're going to find out how Dan and his co-author Mickey managed to get these baseball players to share their ghost stories. We'll hear about haunted hotels and international baseball legends and rituals. We'll learn about Babe Ruth and Roberto Clemente ghost encounters. Dan will also share stories he's heard about hauntings at Detroit's Tiger Stadium and Anaheim's Angel Stadium. We'll also learn about secret passageways found beneath Dodger Stadium in LA, the Chicago Cubs' strange affiliation with California's Catalina Island, and additional stories about baseball players who've had UFO sightings or psychic premonitions. And, of course, that's just a scratch at the surface of all the areas we're going to be covering here with Dan Gordon, looking at the world of haunted baseball from someone who has spoken to hundreds of former and current Major League Baseball players who confided their supernatural tales. Altogether, it's a fun and spooky edition of the program which melds America's pastime with the paranormal as we explore the world of haunted baseball with Dan Gordon. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Dan Gordon, allow me to provide you with a little background on him. Dan Gordon first experienced the magic of Fenway Park in the summer of 1975, when his father took him to his first baseball game. With a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, Gordon studied global baseball culture in Japan, the Dominican Republic, Cuba, and Nicaragua. His writings on baseball have appeared in numerous publications, including the Providence Journal and Fort Worth Star. And he's the author of Cape Encounters, Contemporary Cape Cod Ghost Stories. He lives and dies with the Boston Red Sox. His websites are www.hauntedbaseball.com as well as fieldofscreamsonline.com. Obviously, those allude to the 2 books that he has co-authored with Mickey Bradley, Haunted Baseball and Field of Screams, both available wherever fine books are sold. be sure to check him out. And with all that said, let's get down to business and throw out the first pitch of the BoA Audio Baseball Doubleheader. This interview was recorded on March 9th, 2011. Dan Gordon talks about baseball and the paranormal on BoA Audio Season 6. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of BoA Audio Season 6. And in years past, we've done the baseball special, and we're going to do another baseball special this year. Hopefully you're listening to it in conjunction with this special interview that we're doing here. Because, I get a lot of flack from the paranormal buffs who listen to the program because we do a pure baseball episode, and it doesn't really delve into the world of the paranormal. So I knew that I had to get this guy here on the program, Dan Gordon. He's the co-author of a pair of really fascinating books, Haunted Baseball and the latest book, Field of Screams. And as I said, he's the co-author with Mickey Bradley. And we're going to be talking about ghost stories and baseball and sort of the world of the supernatural and how it has crept into the world of baseball as well. So it's going to be a very entertaining and enlightening interview, I think. And I'm really looking forward to it. And it's been a long time coming. I had a chance to meet Dan about 2 years ago and told him to get him on the show, but it's just taken me forever to get it going. So I'm really excited to finally manage to get him here on the program. Dan, welcome to BoA Audio.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tim.
We like to start out with the bio, the background. Who is Dan Gordon? I presume you obviously have an interest in baseball and the paranormal. So how do these dual interests sort of cross paths, and, how did these interests come about in the first place?
I think it kind of was brewing throughout my lifetime. I mean, I grew up, with being a Red Sox fan, and under the cloud of the so-called curse of the Bambino, the idea that the Red Sox were cursed by Babe Ruth for having traded him, and I don't know if I ever truly believed it, but you definitely kind of scratched your heads at times. But I also I've been studying in baseball, since college. I got a grant called the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, and I studied baseball in Japan and Latin America for a whole year. They gave me $13,000. I've written this proposal to just kind of compare baseball cultures of different countries, and everywhere I went, I kind of, one of the things that always drew me was kind of the superstitions in those places, and it, like in Nicaragua, kind of the voodoo rituals that fans do, and even like players do, and kind of sometimes jokingly, but sometimes with some intent as well. And players do get spooked by it. It was kind of a rivalry between the Pacific Ocean side of Nicaragua and the Atlantic side, and voodoo kind of played a part in that. And, same thing in Japan, with all these pendants and rituals and prayers that they have, and, things they do like sprinkling salt to ward off, purify, a ball field, and to ward off evil spirits, and, kind of things that are interwoven in the culture, but also in baseball kind of as a way to kind of, protect players and protect their health, and so I saw a lot of that there, and throughout Latin America, and where I traveled in Dominican Republic and Cuba too, and various rituals there as well. And I came back, I started writing about international baseball, and then I kind of moved out to Cape Cod and to work on a manuscript on international baseball. And while I was out there, I kind of became interested in the ghost stories, and that just kind of snowballed, and it took me a while to realize that, maybe I could write a book about ghost stories in baseball itself. But a friend of mine, he's an anthropologist and kind of had guided me along when I first got this grant, and I still, good friends with him. Every year we go up to Cooperstown at the Baseball Hall of Fame. They have a research symposium, and we talk about our research ideas and our writing, and he had written an article on baseball superstition. He's a former minor league player himself, played in the 60s, and he wrote probably the definitive article on baseball superstition. It's called Baseball Magic, and it's been reprinted perhaps 100 times in various magazines and journals and things, and keeps getting updated. And he said, he just asked me, well, aren't there ghost stories in baseball too? And you always think of baseball, you think of the lively stadiums and, a lot of action going on. And, you always hear the metaphors about ghosts in the game. The ghost of the baseball Hall of Famers are called immortals, and that kind of thing. And but to act, I just started wondering whether these stories actually did exist. And nobody's completely well read in baseball. There's so much written about it. You could, in a lifetime, you couldn't possibly digest it all. But I've always kept up adamantly with, I'm obsessed with, reading about it and studying, knowing what's being written and what's being talked about and watching games and that kind of thing. And I'd never heard of, actual ghost story. And so, besides a couple of hotel stories. And so I just kind of went at it and started, I teamed up with another fellow writer. He's also he's actually a diehard Yankees fan.
Yeah.
And, we went to school together. And anyway, wrapping up, we just decided to go and just interview players and we got credentialed by all the teams. And up to the present, we've talked to over 1,000 players and gotten a variety of stories.
Oh, wow. Over 1,000 players. Holy shit. That's amazing.
Past and present, major leaguers, guys that, some guys that kind of bounced up and down, but, some superstars as well, so Hall of Famers too. So it was pretty cool. Not every player, of course, had a story, but a lot of players, if they didn't have a direct story, they had a team story or, talked about a certain, place and the rumors they'd heard. But a lot of players, a surprising amount of players that had actual, first-hand stories or believed, that certain things were going on, paranormal things were going on at either ballparks or spring training sites or hotels. And, so it's kind of, we went at this and just recorded what's out there, what's been said.
Now, what were the player reactions like when you approached them to ask them about, like, ghost stories and stuff? How'd that even, what was the reception like in these initial meetings and stuff?
I thought I'd be kind of laughed out of the locker room when we first kind of went at it because, players are so, kind of stoic and everything. But actually, it was almost the opposite. I mean, like, guys, especially like, the lesser-known guys especially because, they love to talk. They don't get much journalist time, but like even the superstars, I mean, they found the question like totally disarming, because it is, we're not kind of going at them trying to dig up dirt, of their, we're asking them, something that they actually talk about a lot. They talk about these places, they talk about it on the team buses, and they swap the stories, and some of the stories are really famous amongst players, and so it's kind of, to them, it was kind of fun, and like some players, it brought a smile to their face, or some players kind of like took me, offered me a seat and started, telling me stuff and, telling stories, and, Mickey, my co-author, got the same reaction, So yeah, we were surprised, how players trusted us and opened up.
Yeah. Well, having, dealt in the world of the paranormal, it seems like, when someone has those experiences, they're always dying to tell somebody their story. So, and I'm sure it kind of came out of left field, no pun intended, to have someone ask them about that, So it's probably like, here's a great opportunity to finally tell this story that, that's been sort of rattling around in the dugout all these years and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good way of framing it. I hadn't really. I mean, definitely. Yeah, it's kind of. In some cases, they're like, dying to tell it because dying. Some players like said to us, they said to us, I want this book. I want to see this book when it's done because they've heard some of the stories and they know that a lot more float around and they just really wanted to know. So some cases, during the process of the interview, players were grilling me as well. And then, some things, players didn't want to know, I mean, we got a whole chapter on ashes and like, they're in our first book, Haunted Baseball, and kind of the whole ritual that fans do especially, but even teams do, and, front office folks. There's people get their ashes sprinkled in ballparks, and in some cases, the teams, not only do they, permit it, but they actually arrange the ceremony. And so, of course, players get freaked out when they hear about, that they're diving for catching left field to be, landing on somebody's, grandfather's ashes or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's definitely they're definitely eager to know these stories too. So.
And in Field of Screams, you detail some of a whole bunch of different stories. I mean, both books are just jam-packed with really great stories. Perfect sort of book to pick up now with baseball season starting for folks, who are going to be sitting around watching the games. And there's a lot of downtime during the games, so it's a great book for the baseball season. It seemed like, having read Field of Screams earlier over the course of this past week, I found it really interesting. Some of the stories about these hotels, it seems like those seem to be pretty predominant. These hotels that are frequently visited by, road teams and stuff like that have these haunted reputations. Talk a little bit about some of these stories of the haunted hotels, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, basically in every league there is like at least one place that, kind of players have trepidation about, staying in. Even in the minors at various levels, and even like in winter ball, like in Mexico, there's a legendary hotel called the Navajo that, players really hate staying at. But the Vista Hotel, it's probably, that and the Vonoy Hotel are probably two of the most famous in the game. And and there've been like so many stories. I mean, literally, we didn't include all the stories because a lot of them are repetitive, like guys saying like that, things like, they're hearing knocking on their walls and the lights going on and off, that kind of thing. But superstars, guys like Tim Lincecum of the San Francisco Giants, telling us that he thought like literally somebody was, pushing against his door and leaning and kind of bending it in, in the middle of the night. Adrian Beltre, saying that, he thought there was a woman who walked past his bed and he could smell the waft of perfume, and, then he felt like somebody pulling at his sheets. Just like really, the stories that range from, again, like the stories you'll hear all the time at hotels, like I mentioned, like the electrical things or banging on the walls, to like kind of actual sightings of apparitions, and those tend to be, of course, the ones that freak out the players the most. Yeah, so at the Pfister Hotel had, there's stories about the owner's ghost, about Bellman walking around and various things. And, of course it all gets twisted and convoluted and exaggerated, and it's hard to tell, ever get to the bottom of, you hear from the player themselves, and, of course they recall it, but when they try to, come up with theories about what happened and everything like that. I mean, you can hear like dozens of theories about like people having committed suicide to murders in certain rooms and that kind of thing. And so it's hard to, but I mean, it's just kind of part of the lore. And basically Mickey and I decided early on that, that's the way the book was going to have to be, because we're not paranormal researchers. We're kind of journalists. So we kind of went at this as almost folklorists, kind of recording like the stories that players have. And, we got all sorts of perspectives. We got, guys we brought in. Some cases we spoke with paranormal groups that had come into these places, but we also spoke with skeptics and, with people who worked at the hotels. And of course, sometimes they try to, cover it up or, protect the image of the hotel, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, we got all different perspectives on it, but, definitely, the Pfister had some really wild stories.
I was really interested too in the chapter on the Japanese baseball, because it seemed like the level of ritual was pretty amazing, and also a lot of the stuff surrounding the team in Hiroshima, which was just remarkable. Sort of how it kind of the city sort of coalesced around the baseball team and the baseball stadium there. I mean, as you say in the book, they built the stadium in Hiroshima on ground zero where the bomb fell. So it's like that was pretty remarkable. Not only that that they sort of galvanized around that, but also that such a hallowed ground, if you will, became the site of the baseball stadium.
Yeah, I always loved, I've been back to Japan many times too, and every time I go to Hiroshima, I loved, the ballpark. They've actually moved to a new stadium now, so it's not the same. It's kind of one of these more modern, stadiums. But but the fans are really into it. I mean, they're kind of really, they do rally around the team, and literally, of all, it's one of the few places where there's been like fan violence and fans attacking, umpires and attacking players and that kind of thing, in Hiroshima. But, also just, there is this sense of pride, and that there was a lot of protests when the new ballpark was built that, because people did kind of have this feel that it was kind of symbolic to have, baseball, kind of, something that's so meaningful and important in Japan being right at that site, with a atomic dome across the street, the only building that remains standing after the, in downtown Hiroshima area, and the river itself. And we did. It was kind of, intriguing that there were lots of ghost stories surrounding, that whole area, and players talking about, the river itself, and like seeing, stories about apparitions, like folks who was sitting, at the edge of the river, and kind of, and story of a player who believed that he would see the river as black sometimes when he saw it, and that would, of course, was the river where, folks, after the blast, kind of, jumped into the river for relief, their last, few moments, kind of a little bit of relief, and such. And just kind of amazing. We got like the perspective of American players that played over there, and kind of, they're kind of this kind of being a little bit spooked out, or, kind of unnerved playing at that spot, but in general, it was just kind of amazing. And, and there are other stories, and like folks, and like one player, as the team captain actually for the Carp, like told us that, he thought that, it wasn't just, the blast spirit, but Hiroshima also had kind of a samurai past, and, some of that may have been kind of what, he actually thought he had at one point encountered one of those ghosts, Team Sorry. So, wow. Some really cool stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, the book is packed with cool stories. Do you have like a particular favorite story amongst all the ones you've heard over the years from these guys?
Yeah, I'm a diehard, emotional, sappy baseball fan. So I love the stories where, where there's kind of just some meaning to it, or things like we had a story in Haunted Baseball about this Brooklyn Dodgers fan who, when he was young, his dad took him. He and his dad would always talk about Dodgers, and it was kind of their way of kind of of bonding, and just like a lot of parent-child relations, but it was kind of very distinctive with him, and he kind of remembers very vividly one of his most favorite experiences was going with his dad, a collar skin, pitch in the World Series, and he pitched shutout, and and it was some amazing performance, and for years and years later, he and his dad would talk about it, and one evening, he happened to get one day, he became a journalist, and he secured an Erskine autographed ball, and he had put it on his mantle, and one evening, like, he heard like a crash, and and he went downstairs, and the ball had for the first time ever fallen off the case, and a few moments later he got a phone call from saying that his dad had just passed away.
Oh wow!
Kind of that kind of stuff. I mean, we got like tons of stories like that, kind of like the Field of Screams variety things, where people but a lot of freaky stuff too. A lot of stories about Babe Ruth's ghost, and people seeing him on various, in houses where the Ruth stayed, or in hotels, or ball fields, and even from Babe Ruth's granddaughter, who kind of believes that, Babe Ruth gives mystical assistance to her at times. So yeah.
Yeah, well, that's the weird part too. That's sort of detailed in Field of Screams, is that the legend of Babe Ruth, and sort of the idea that these ghost sightings, they like in all the various places that he was known to frequent, whether it's in in Massachusetts or down in Florida or New York. It's like all over the place. There's every place that that came into contact with him seems to have stories of Ruthian proportions, if you will.
Yeah, I loved researching that chapter because, I kind of just, I kind of just doing lots of research all over on, like, where Ruth stayed and where he did, and just, like, contacting folks. And, sometimes you talk with somebody who had a brush with the babe as a child, or sometimes you just talked with folks who just had stories handed down to them. But, and from, again, from, Ruth's granddaughter herself, who is also kind of an avid historian about, her granddad, and kind of represents the family too. And it was just really cool to, Ruth was, he's somebody, of course, that, transcended the game. He was kind of, this great American icon, and the more you learned about him, the more, fascinating it was. He's a very complex guy. Everyone knows that he was a tremendous partier and carouser, but he also, did a lot of charity. He played, he got in a lot of trouble because he used to play, barnstorm with the, Negro Leaguers and, things that, that you weren't supposed to do back in the day. And, he, was kind of advocating for baseball to be integrated long before the game actually eventually was. So it's kind of really cool to, found out, and the stories that I heard. It was great, a great chapter to
oh, yeah.
research.
Absolutely, yeah, it was fascinating. And it seemed like particularly interesting, too. We talked about the hotels, but it seems like the haunted locations run the gamut, really, from old hotels to old stadiums to the Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So it's like these immortals, if you will, can be found in all different sorts of places. Very sort of strange like that.
Yeah. I mean, one of my other favorite stories actually was Roberto Clemente in a team dormitory down in the spring training site for the Pittsburgh Pirates in Pirate City in Bradenton, Florida. Mm-hmm. And just the stories of players who felt, spooked out staying in his room, and then, some of the ghost stories connected with that, and just learning some of the history of Clemente and both there during spring training, because he didn't have to stay at that site. He was kind of in his later years, and only, younger players were required to stay there, but he kind of wanted to, and he was mentoring younger players, particularly the Latino players, and it was kind of really cool to hear, some of the guys that knew him, talk about, like, what he did and what he was like, and, but at the same time, like, share some of these really, bizarre stories about, about the dormitory and about the compound itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, was it more sort of like the young guys had the stories, or was it like the old timers sort of had the longer lasting sort of stories that have been passed down over the years?
It was a mixture of both, but definitely the most for the younger guys, and that's something that we found throughout. I mean, we talked to a lot of Hall of Famers, and at first we talked to guys like Willie Mays and Al Kaline, and generally those guys kind of like drew blanks when you asked them about ghost stories. There were exceptions, and whereas the younger guys, stories are a dime a dozen, and kind of wondered whether part of that was, kind of changes in society where now so many paranormal shows on TV, and it's just kind of so more openly talked about and accepted. Whereas before it was kind of, you kept it to yourself maybe a little more, So, so definitely with the Pirate City. But, I mean, like one of the cool quotes we got from, one of the Clemente's, a player who knew Clemente, and he became a longtime coach in the Pirates minor league system. He told us that, he wished he actually did encounter, Clemente's ghost. It would be great to see him again and that kind of thing. So, whereas younger guys, they were just freaked out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, it does seem that way with ghosts being so popular nowadays. It might be more fashionable, I guess you could say, to have ghost stories than maybe back in the day when it would be just sort of something that would be considered silly, or that you wouldn't want to admit to being scared by something like that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
We got a longtime listener of the program who's from Detroit, and I thought it was interesting, though, that once they built the new stadium, they wanted to preserve the old stadium, and then they never then it just like sat there in disrepair for like 10 years. Is that pretty much what happened?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it was kind of, it was disrepair to, to the nth degree. I mean, it was kind of like, it was ransacked. I mean, like, Tiger Stadium, one of the reasons I think they moved was because the neighborhood, kind of crime was a little bit on the rise in the neighborhood, and stuff. I mean, but that was Tiger Stadium, basically, it was opened the same year as Fenway Park, the same day actually.
Yeah.
And 1912, and basically had such a tremendous history, and it was it was such an intimate ballpark, and Tigers fielded some amazing teams and some great legendary players, from Ty Cobb, on up through Hank Greenberg up to Alan Trammell, and so on, played there, and so like you got, so like a lot of players that we interviewed about the stadium, like always told us, those who had a chance to play there, that it was like amazing to have had that opportunity to play there, and they walked around with cameras and things, and I remember Tim Hudson, the Braves, telling us that he thought it was cool to use the urinal because he thought like Babe Ruth wants to use the urinal, that kind of thing. But in general, like it did fall into neglect, and Mickey went through there. He actually got a couple tours through there. Second time we were there with a gentleman from the Motor City Ghost Hunters group, and he basically the place was in total. There were trees growing literally up in the stands. The field was choked with weeds and tiles and asbestos and here and there, and furniture like broken apart and like strewn all over the place. And maybe that added to a lot of the ghost stories that some people who did work there during that 10-year span had about the place, but a lot of security guards that we spoke with swore up and down that that there were ghosts there, particularly Ty Cobb. He was the most talked about presence, and anything from him running the bases at night to encountering his presence in the hallway, or hearing voices and his voice and whatnot. Just other bizarre things. I mean, in the security office itself, like guards talked about sitting down, and like one guard actually said he saw scratches forming on his arm. Kind of really bizarre story, but in general, just those kind of tales were very common, and it's kind of really cool for us to it gave us a good reason to kind of explore such a great great chapter in baseball history at the same time, but also kind of just to get sense of how nostalgic folks are there, and fans are, and how the history kind of carries through. And that was kind of one of the things that Mickey and I really loved doing, was just kind of the idea that baseball is so nostalgic, and that history you can always feel the history, and that players who've been dead like 60 years, like Babe Ruth, are still talked about and are remembered, and people still know their personality, and there's no other sport like that, or perhaps no other American institution. So it's really kind of cool to capture that, and similar stories from Comerica Park where the Tigers moved, similar like bizarre things happening there too.
I thought it was talking about ballparks and sort of the moves from one old ballpark to the other. I thought it was interesting because I remembered the story of the guy who buried the David Ortiz jersey in Yankee Stadium, and I was really surprised reading Field of Screams that he wasn't like the only guy dumping stuff into the into the makeup of the stadium. Like apparently there's Mets stuff in there, there's more Red Sox stuff in there, there's Yankee stuff in there. I guess talk a little bit about some of the shenanigans that were going on during the construction of the stadium.
Yeah, we got a phone call like in April, I think it was 2009, 2008, I forget. But it was from a report from the New York Post, and like he told us, you got to keep this under wraps because I'm not going to break the story to tomorrow. But yeah, we got this guy who buried this Red Sox David Ortiz jersey in Yankee Stadium and said he put a 30-year curse on it. So, so we actually, it was kind of cool to actually hear the story before it broke. And once it broke, it was crazy because it just it was the Red Sox-Yankees rivalry is so crazy as it is, and just the idea of a new curse born and of some going to that extent. And so Mickey and I, we knew when we, Haunted Baseball was pretty out there, but we knew when we were writing Field of Screams that had to be a chapter. So we just started interviewing. We interviewed him and some construction workers, and we already knew that back when Yankee Stadium was first built, that in the records of the construction company, White Construction Company, and somebody jotted in the margin that he'd thrown a good luck in the water pipe, underneath Yankee Stadium, and you can always say there was already superstition already, there, and they won their first World Series that year, and then won all the, tortured, Red Sox fans for another century practically. But in general, they we talked to Gino Castiglione, who buried it, and he just mentioned I know some other guys, and he just mentioned a couple names, and we started talking to them, and then we talked to more guys, and it turns out there were lots of guys, as you mentioned, that had buried stuff, and one guy, he told us that he'd buried the 2004 World Series of coins, the year the Red Sox, broke the so-called curse. In all four of the major footings of the stadium. So a lot of things that weren't. The Yankees when they found out that the Ortiz jersey was in there at first, they denied it. And then when some other construction workers came to us the year we saw him do it. They went in and they actually jackhammered, through 5 feet of cement and spent $50,000 unearthing it. So, but still, even though they did all that, there's still many other things buried there that have either good karma and bad karma. One Yankee fan actually, a Red Sox fan actually, for his friend, he actually buried his Yankee fan's ashes in Section 208 of the ball. So little kind of battleground, I guess, for the soul.
Yeah.
Stadium.
Like a supernatural battle between different factions of fans and stuff like that. Pretty weird. Now, I presume then, based on just the sheer age of some of these teams and everything, but that some of these new teams don't really have the sort of same sort of traditions, I guess, of spirit hauntings and whatnot. You know what I mean? Do teams like the the Diamondbacks and the Rockies and stuff like that, do they not have the same kind of traditions really of weird stuff since they're pretty new?
Yeah, not as much. I mean, obviously Yankee Stadium and Yankee Stadium probably has the most ghost stories from the perspective of players, and Fenway Park has in Wrigley Field in Chicago, and a few others, from perspective of workers and Dodger Stadium too, from fans. I mean, but there are newer parks that Toronto. I still call it the Sky Dome. I don't get the lead. They change it every 2 years. Rogers Center. I don't know if it's still that, but they basically the player Miguel Batista told us that he had a encounter with what he felt was a spirit of a Native American. He himself kind of claimed, kind of that of Indian ancestry. He's Dominican, but the Taino Indians. His grandmother was, descended, and so he thought that. He also played a Native American flute, and he was down beneath the stands one day before a game, relaxing, playing it, and he claims, that the flute got swatted out of his hands and flew 5 feet, away. Similar stories from, other new parks. Actually, you mentioned the Diamondbacks, and that definitely, you might even, very newer than the Blue Jays, of course, and they had an expansion team. They had stories from the 2001 World Series that we talk about in Haunted Baseball. After September 11th, there were ghost stories from players and from fans about the spirits, those who had died at in the trade towers, being present during the games, the World Series at Yankee Stadium. But also, Diamondback, players guys like Mark Grace, and thought that there's some bizarre things happening. At the very end of Game 6, when the Diamondbacks clinched it, kind of this wind-swept, funnel kind of going along in the field and thing, and just kind of, just some really eerie coincidence. I can't recall the exact details, but
yeah,
we wrote a pretty, kind of the timing and the exact time that things happened. But yeah, players were convinced that something was going on there too. So I mean, it's not all, of the, it's not all of like past players and of Babe Ruth hanging around and that kind of thing. Sometimes it's, some stadiums are thought to be built over burial grounds, and Anaheim Stadium, is legendary among players, where players feel that was built over a Native American burial ground, and we've got cursed stories and tragedies from there that players feel were connected with, with that, to that fact. So yeah, we have a few workers at Anaheim Stadium who believe they've seen ghosts there, and one guy who a longtime bat boy who even claims that he would see like Native American faces and bodies within the walls itself, and
oh wow,
sometimes like he felt like they were chasing him down the hallway. So some new stadium teams too have these stories.
Yeah, and in the Anaheim chapter, you guys talked to one guy who's worked there for like a long time, and you almost feel like that he'll end up like perpetuating this when he dies almost, you know what I mean? It feels like it's almost like a self-perpetuating thing where these guys spend all their time in these stadiums, on the overnight or as the clubhouse attendant or something like that, and these are some of the best days of their lives, and you think to yourself, 10, 20, 30 years from now, these will be the ghosts of the stadium, if you will. I mean, I can imagine that if I was in those positions, I'd come back after I left and went to the great beyond, if you will. So you wonder about that kind of thing too. It's like the joy that many people feel being associated with the game. They never want to leave, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, so like players and workers actually kind of express that a little bit. Where they talk about that respect, and I mentioned that boy, and he also like saw like even saw like players and ghosts and such. Anaheim has had a lot of tragedies and connected with that curse too. Car accidents and other bizarre things that players getting shot and killed, that kind of thing. Most recently, Nick Adenhart, who died. Yeah, but he mentioned he's actually I mentioned he was a bat boy, and one of the players and former players and coaches that he saw the most was Jimmy Reese, who was a former player. And he actually roomed with Babe Ruth once. But even before that, he was actually a bat boy back in the 19-teens with the Angels when they were a minor league franchise. So it was kind of cool, that connectedness, of that, and he didn't express it, but it was just something that Mickey and I were thinking about as we were writing the book.
Yeah, it's sort of like an unspoken thing. You don't want to say to somebody, well, when you die, you're probably going to be hanging around here too, pal. Have it go over too well.
On this day 6 years ago, some guy in Houston ran over an elderly man while going after a home run ball, and this woman took the law into her own hands and started whacking the guy with her cane. Bravo, honey, bravo.
Seriously, she should have just gotten up and just whacked him across the face one. And why is this guy sitting there letting her take the heat?
You're listening to Banal of America Audio.
Dan will tell us stories he's heard about hauntings at Tiger Stadium and the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim. I don't think that's the name of the fucking stadium. Arrowhead Pond's not where they play. Angel fucking shit.
I really enjoyed the chapter on the Cubs and Catalina Island, because it seemed just so strange that it's sort of like this enclave of Cubs fandom on Catalina Island. I didn't even realize either that Wrigley, who owned the Cubs, also owned the whole island, Catalina Island, which was like, wow, this guy must have been doing all right for himself. So talk a little bit about that Cubs and Catalina Island connection.
Yeah, I love doing that chapter too. Of course, visiting Catalina Island off the coast of LA, just amazing place to go as well. It's really the Catalina Islands, you know, I guess folks on the West Coast probably know about it, but it's kind of just amazing, you know, set of islands where they have a lot of, you know, it's mostly undeveloped. You know, there's only like one town, Avalon. The rest of it is just all nature and like animals that can only be found there, nowhere else. And yeah, Wrigley, you know, he bought the island, you know, kind of as a place to go, but also kind of as he wanted to build it, and wanted to build it and turn it into a resort. And one way he decided to do that is, you know, he owned the Cubs. It was partially at that time, but he had enough influence eventually to bring the Cubs over there for spring trainings. And you know, he knew that the publicity back then, back then, even much more so than now, like, you know, baseball was it in the media, and like newspapers just like wrote, you know, endlessly about spring training and workouts and what players did and what they ate and drank and said. Yeah. I mean, of course, you know, they always had the G-rated version of it, but they yeah, but yeah, they, you know, so the Cubs trained there literally for off and on for like 30 years, something like that, starting in the 1920s, and they really, you know, the fans loved it. And you know, every time the team arrived by, you know, they took the train from Chicago to LA, and there was, you know, when they got off on the ferry to Catalina Island, you know, the whole town, they called off school and work, and the whole town was basically there to greet them. There was mariachi band and parade, and you know, basically the team like would traveled in a float to the spring training compound. And you know, basically the players, you know, back in the day, you know, they interacted more with, you know, the locals too. And so like there was kind of this sense, you know, like, you know, kids would get a chance to like, you know, catch fungu ball, you know, and it was kind of just, you know, players would give their old uniforms to young kids. And so it was kind of cool. We went over there, and I did talk to, you know, a couple of old timers who were still alive when the Cubs were there, and, you know, remembered and shared stories about it. But there was also this one gentleman who, he had actually was a former restaurant owner, and he bought the building that was formerly, you know, the restaurant was formerly the clubhouse for the Cubs. It was right across from the ball field, and you know, there were even some lockers back there, and you know, he believes, you know, one day he was taking out the trash, and he saw, you know, a ball player walking past him, and you know, in the old vintage uniform, and so that was kind of his experience. And then it turned out like after that there were a number of other, you know, encounters with ghosts, and so there was kind of just a sense that building was haunted. But you know, it's just kind of cool to delve into that history and to kind of capture, you know, what it meant, you know, what baseball meant on this one island at that time. And to this day, there's, you know, even though it's located, you know, off the coast of LA, you know, most of the town folks are still Cubs fans, and you know, they still like fly a blue flag on, you know, at the harbor master puts up a blue flag when the Cubs win, and you know, you know, red flag when they lose, something like that.
Yeah, like they do at Wrigley.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, beyond ghost stories, did you hear any other sort of like weird tales of anything else paranormal, whether it be like, you know, UFO sightings or anything strange like that, psychic premonitions, stuff like that, that would sort of be also in the realm of the paranormal?
Yeah, definitely. You know, we had several UFO sightings. One player, and actually he didn't make it in this book, in our next, but he had told us about. He's a former pitcher with the Angels, actually, and he, when he was in the minors, he stayed at a hotel. No, he was in spring training actually in Arizona, and he like remembers that. From his hotel deck, you know, his UFO was kind of hovering above his balcony, and it turned out to be the night of that famous incident in Phoenix.
Oh wow!
And, yeah, but in general, though, we didn't get much in the UFO. Bobby Cox, you know, who just retired, you know, favorite guys in baseball. You know, he told me about it actually. You know, when he was in Venezuela, like that. You know, when players drove home, they swore up and down that they would see UFOs. You know, and they were driving kind of like in pitch darkness, Venezuela being third world country.
Yeah.
And, so that was kind of, as close as we got there, I guess. But, a lot of premonitions, of course. And, baseball, there are so many, predictions, and whether it be, Babe Ruth's so-called ball shot or, so, I mean, for every premonition, person who claims a premonition, there's always someone who says that, there are always the forgotten ones that didn't pan out.
Yeah.
But yeah, there were things, we had a chapter on that, and one of the stories we had was Roberto Clemente about it, his son having a premonition the night before Clemente died in the plane crash, telling his dad, you're going to die tomorrow, please don't get on the plane.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of cool. But yeah, also premonitions about, like, called home runs and things like that, too, in the book.
Yeah. I'm willing to bet, like, with a lot of that almost every at-bat someone's predicting a home run, so it's like, you only much like regular psychics, you only really remember the hits, right? Yeah, but I mean, the baseball, there's such a, one of the great things about the game is it's kind of leaves so much room for thinking and for reflecting and for, for theories and discussion and and the paranormal fits in well with that. I mean, and it's kind of, the game's got its weird bounces. Every game is unique. There's always something new. I mean, I love it when people say that, like, games are like fingerprints because, again, it's just, every game, you always see something, every couple weeks you see something you've never seen before, and you're like, and there's a lot of things. We got a chapter in Field of Screams about a minor league game where in Key West, Florida, between the Cubs affiliate and the Cardinals affiliate, where a pop-up, it was supposedly a pop-up, and it was just going to clear second base, and it never came down. And 25 guys on the field for the Cubs who swore up and down. Actually, it was for the Cardinals players. It was the Cubs who were playing Key West, who swore up and down that that it was going to clear the infield. Players were ducking and throwing their arms up, and the runner for the Key West Cubs was actually rounded all the bases kind of haltingly, thinking that the ball some kind of play and going on. Or just not knowing what was going on, there's a lot of arguing. But yeah, I mean, so that kind of thing, it's kind of cool that all these different things happen and transpire, and just kind of it makes the game, very susceptible to those kind of stories. Absolutely, yeah. Now we got a longtime friend of the program, Greg Bishop. He's a diehard Dodgers fan, and I'm looking here at the back of Haunted Baseball. It says hidden passageways beneath the depths of Dodger Stadium. What's up with these hidden passageways? What's the story behind those things?
Well, there were a lot of Dodger Stadium was built into the hill. It was built into a hill in an old former Mexican American neighborhood, and when the ballpark was built, there was a lot of controversy. There was actually a referendum at one point, and ultimately, there were folks in that community who refused to leave and were like forcibly, dragged away. And when the ballpark was built, as I mentioned, it was built into this hill, and because it kind of goes deep down within, and I got a chance to like see some of those corridors, and work is taking me down and like even showing me some of the vaults where like old Brooklyn Dodgers memorabilia is, and they talked about like ghostly happenings there, like things like hearing their name called out, or walking into a vault and seeing like all like the memorabilia like thrown about and strewn about, and in no way that it could have been from like an earthquake. There's just kind of the way it was scattered or whatnot. So yeah, there's that element, and then there's also kind of this legendary story that it was passages built deep down underneath L.A. From the L.A. Library, and actually ending. There was actually kind of a dome-like structure like underneath Dodger Stadium, and that's kind of more old Native American lore. And there was a gentleman who actually in the 1930s who went drilling for it, and the city stopped him at some point. It got a lot of attention, and there are a lot of stories in the LA Times about it, but it was actually stopped before he could get deep enough, and, which of course, raised a lot of theories and whatnot. But so I mean, there's a lot of legend too about the ballpark, and, from that perspective as well. But, as for, kind of, concrete, plenty of concrete ghost stories that we got from workers themselves to kind of, ground it as well. I mean, just everything from like seeing like a misty formation, often walking across the field late at night in the stadium. Former concession captain, they call him cap. They had concessionaire on each level of the ballpark. Talked about that and like seeing that late at night when he was doing inventory. To workers claiming that they'd hear footsteps behind them or footsteps walking along the top level of the ballpark late at night, and some workers using to work alone in the ballpark, especially cleaning workers. It was great to kind of capture that and capture some of the history there of the Dodgers too.
Now, as a diehard Red Sox fan, what's your favorite story related to the Red Sox that's found its way into the books?
I loved talking to Carl Bean. He's a PA voice for the Red Sox. He's been there several years now, but his mentor in radio and Sherm Fellow, who was a longtime voice of the Red Sox. He was there like 25 years. They still play his voice when they do the Red Sox broadcast on TV. And, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Fenway Park. Yep. He's got this deep staccato voice and, very no nonsense. And he was just kind of this true character. And Carl Bean, actually, has felt on many occasions that Feller, who died in 1998, I believe, is still in the booth with him, kind of looking over his shoulder, kind of doing pranks at time, like making headsets fly or announcements disappear and that kind of thing, kind of messing up the electronics. So that's kind of a cool story just to get that whole history. And, Carl Bean, he actually, a lot of folks say that his voice sounds a little bit like Sherm Feller, and, he definitely, still worships him and, touches Feller's picture. Carl Bean, knocks on Sherm Feller's picture, which is, located right outside the announcement booth before every game, and says, wish me luck, Sherm. So it's kind of this connection as well. So, yeah, that was kind of a cool chapter, right, about Fenway. But, yeah, we heard some, weird ghost stories in the ballpark as well.
Now, what's been, now that you guys have not just the first book, but the second book out, what's been the reaction from the players and from the baseball community now that you guys are sort of out there with your stuff? Are you getting better reactions, more people want to talk to you, or is it sort of how are they taking to this?
It's mixed. I mean, sadly, but I mean, it's, of course, a lot of players don't read, so, so unless we made it into a TV show, they might never, but some players have gotten wind of some of the samples of it on the internet. It was kind of hilarious once when we were interviewing some players. I believe they were Pirates players, and they started reciting the exact story that we had in Haunted Baseball of the Vinoy Hotel, and then the stories on the team trainers and various folks about that hotel in St. Petersburg. So sometimes they get wind of it, but yeah, there are other players, do that. And one of the coolest things and thing that, always, means a lot to Mickey and me is when, players actually say that, yeah, that happened, that was true, or that was great. And Jim Tomei, he was, a key part of a chapter in Haunted Baseball, where he talked to the former trainer Jimmy Warfield coming back in the form, he thought in the form of a bird. A lot of players said that they encountered this, and that Warfield kind of hung around for 2 series for 6 games, and then during the memorial service for Warfield, when there were 300 players in the upper terrace of Progressive Field, kind of taking in the service, they looked around and they saw the seagull fly off and, circle the bases and fly off. and never to be seen again. But Tomei like said to us that he was like really blown away by the chapter, and that's kind of cool to when players give that feedback and say that they liked it. So yeah.
The other cool part sort of is that with the influx of Japanese and Latin players, it seems like there's sort of like this melting pot of superstition and stories and stuff like that, all come together here in the American baseball, if you will, which I thought was kind of interesting. You see the guys nowadays like wearing the necklaces and stuff like that, that became popular with the Japanese players, and so I thought that was kind of interesting. You see that happening in American baseball.
Yeah, and even American players that play over in Japan or in Latin ball sometimes pick up these things as well, and bring a little bit of that back with them. Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of cool that also they kind of even Japanese players picking up some of the American traditions, like Hideki Okajima with the Red Sox. The Red Sox bullpen and Jonathan Palpa, particularly in 07, had this thing where they called themselves the Pirates, and they had this plastic parrot that would sit on sometimes on Papelbon's shoulder, but sometimes just perched over there. And players, when they bullpen relievers before they took the field, they would touch it, and it was. Okajima was one of the strongest believers, and the parrot was actually stolen during the ALCS celebration, and the bullpen made such a big thing, and Mike Timlin, the reliever, got on TV and actually pleaded, for Okajima's sake, if for it to be returned. So so definitely, it is that melting pot, as you say, and it's kind of cool, and I haven't really seen players sprinkling salt in American dugouts, but you never know. I mean, a lot of the superstitious stuff that it just you only see on TV or read about a tiny fraction of what actually goes on on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, are certain positions more akin to superstitious things? Are closers more superstitious than, say, starting pitchers, or have you noticed anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure about the difference between closers and starting pitchers. Probably pitchers in general are a little bit more superstitious than players, just because they don't pitch every day, first of all, and secondly, they're and so they have a lot of time to stew on things, but also. There's just long rituals that go way back. I mean, the idea that, you don't talk to a pitcher before a game, which I always thought was personally, I think it's kind of, counterproductive because, players get so wound up, nervous before a game. So, not talking and relaxing probably makes it work. But, yeah, I mean, you see it in the clubhouse. You're not supposed to go up and talk to a guy. But, when they're pitching a no-hitter, you're not supposed to mention it. And, guys... You especially see, when a pitcher's throwing a no-hitter, that other guys will, literally, slide down the bench and, get further away, rather than supporting it. I mean, it's just part of the superstition. And but, definitely the hitters have their rituals, too. And it was really interesting. I mean, one of the players that's most renowned, for... in public eye and even among players as being superstitious, Nomar Garciaparra.
Yeah.
And he had, this really, he pulled on his glove and, put his foot in, drew something and, stepped into the plate. He stepped up to the plate, and I, when I interviewed him, I asked him, oftentimes when I'm talking to players and I mention are you superstitious, what superstitions they have, and they always joke oh, go talk to Nomar, and he kind of chuckled when he said this, and he says, well, I actually don't regard them as superstitions. I actually, pick them up as a routine, and everything I do has a purpose, or was, kind of part of, what coaches taught me, and kind of getting me settled into the plate and keeping my batting gloves tight and all this. And when you talk to batting coaches, they're always the first one to say, we think that, these superstitions are great because they get the player focused, they're, whether it's a superstition or a routine, it really doesn't matter. The players just stepping up. So, baseball is such a game of, as I mentioned, it's just such a bizarre game. I mean, and it's such a game of chance and, things, you could, totally crush the ball and it can, land in someone's glove or, broken back rounder that, goes through, a Bill Buckner's legs or something a bouncer that goes through Bill Buckner's legs. So, I mean, there's always kind of like that players always feel like part of the game is beyond their control, so they turn to superstition and they turn to, these rituals to kind of feel like they have some kind of control still in the game.
Yeah, I can see that, absolutely. Now, we all know about the Red Sox curse and the Cubs curse, but are there other ones that are sort of like less well-known as far as, teams being cursed or even players being cursed or anything like that?
Yeah, tons of them. And, some of them are only known locally. One of them that kind of got broken last year was the curse of the plaque with the San Francisco Giants. The Giants hadn't won, before last year, they hadn't won from 1954. Which is like the third longest, drought, current drought in baseball, World Series championship drought.
Yeah.
And that was when they were still in the Polo Grounds, and they had a plaque up in the Polo Grounds. It was 500 feet deep in the outfield. Back in the day, even monuments some monuments. Yankee Stadium had that too originally. Monuments were on the field in the act, and it was for this guy named Eddie Grant, who was a World War I veteran, kind of like this ordinary player. He was known for his bunting, but not much more. But he was like a really smart guy. Got his law degree from Harvard while he was still playing, and he when he retired, he went on. At age 34, he enlisted in World War I as an officer, and he was in the Statue of Liberty division, and he went to the Battle of Argonne. Rescue the so-called Lost Battalion, and he was shot in the abdomen and died instantly. And in 1921 the team put up this plaque. But when the Giants moved west from Polo Grounds to San Francisco, the very last game, fans swarmed the field, and that's the last time that folks remember seeing the plaque. Like some people thought one of the equipment guys that was still actually with the team back in 2007 when we interviewed him actually said that he thought that plaque was lost in transit, but other folks thought that it was stolen and whatnot. Starting in the early 2000s, some veterans groups started complaining because the San Francisco Giants never tried to replace the plaque, and they started complaining, and the team kind of blew it off. And one Peter McGowan, actually president of the team, actually said, that was the New York Giants history, not our past. And
oh wow.
But of course, gradually that kind of attitude. And, the team continuing to lose kind of just made this theory that, that Eddie Grant's, plaque was the cause of the team's drought. So it's called the curse of the plaque, and it kind of, over the years, and actually to the point where in 2006, the team finally, put this plaque left field dual gate on the, near the bleachers. This replica of the plaque, and so some say that maybe that helped the team to overcome it. But yeah, there are a lot of local, funny curses like that, and it's really easy. Even with the curse of the Bambino, the Red Sox curse, it's really easy to kind of look back in history and kind of point and say, oh, that happened, so that's the cause. That's why the team hasn't won. It's just again part of the game and part of a way. But it's hard to know what's paranormal and what's just kind of, recreating history or trying to explain it away.
Yeah, exactly. That's what, trying to put order into chaos, if you will.
Exactly, yeah.
Now, this new book, it came out this past year, of course, Field of Screams, and Haunted Baseball came out about 2 or 3 years ago. What's next for you and Mickey? We looking at a third installment of the series?
Yeah, I've got a whole file for, I've got to do some more interviewing. But yeah, definitely could do a third one. I've also got some files for a book, Haunted Sports, and I'm also kind of dabbling in some fiction too. I've got this family that came over from Russia in the early 20th century and started a farm, and So I'm kind of like, really interesting how they kind of, resurrected this, piece of land and made it into something, and kind of the characters are kind of cool. So I'm kind of working on that as well. So I don't know exactly what's going to come first. I'm kind of just like got several things on the deck, and I work on each one,
as it comes along.
I kind of go back and forth, yeah. But I'm kind of eager to try my hand a little bit.
So you're looking at just a whole. But you say like a ghosts in other sports, or just paranormal in other sports, or what's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, there are, baseball I think has more of these stories than any other sport. Football has a number. Football has a long history as well, and kind of, there are these stories like the ghost of the Gipper with with Notre Dame, that kind of thing. And there are a few stadiums that in our research we've found over the years, and so yeah, there could, there could be a book on that, but it's still in the works, and it's part of the not knowing exactly what's going to come next is budgetary as well, because of course to do a book on haunted sports, you get all these books cost a lot of money for travel and the research.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Like when you interview these guys, did you drive? How did you even interview all these different players and stuff? Were you down there like at spring training, or was it like when they come to Boston you talk to them, or over the phone? How'd that all go down?
Yeah, mostly. Spring training was the best place, but yeah, I mean we did a lot in Boston. Mickey was on in Chicago a lot, so he got a lot of players coming through there with both their teams. Sometimes New York. I went up to Toronto and to LA, and went to Detroit, and probably a couple other places too. Off the top of my head, I can't think of, but definitely a lot. I mean, you get a lot of former players that are passing through in the minors too, and you catch them. But yeah, so we put a lot of mileage on the cars, and this is kind of a story that maybe I shouldn't share, but in order to go to LA, like I got involved in Wendy's had these giveaway cups that had these cups, so I actually would climb into the dumpster and get these cups so I could have enough money for LA. So yeah, I mean, you definitely, we definitely got around quite a bit. So.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do to make it happen. So, now where can people pick up Field of Screams and Haunted Baseball? I'm sure they can get them on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and those sites online. Probably the regular bookstores, right?
You can, yeah, exactly. We have our website, fieldofscreamsonline.com, and that hooks up to all of those sites as well. And it's pretty much should be in most bookstores too. If not, they can get it on order as well. So yeah.
Awesome, yeah, and I highly recommend the books to folks. Like I said, they're perfect reading for this time of year, especially. The weather's getting a little better, and you're not ready to go outside yet because it's still kind of cold. But the ball games are on, and it's time to relax in front of the TV and watch some baseball. So it's perfect reading material during the games. So especially on a rain delay. If there's a rain delay, you definitely want to bust out these books because keep you busy during the downtime.
Exactly. Yeah, I got to catch one of your baseball shows. I didn't realize you had that tradition.
Oh yeah. We do a traditional paranormal experts come on and have their picks for the year and talk a little bit about their hometown teams, that kind of stuff. So that's why I've tried to tailor the episode here a little bit towards some of those guys. I think we've covered just about everybody's home team. You got any Kansas City Royals stories?
Not a direct one. We had these rumors about the George Brett Bridge being haunted, but we haven't gotten any witnesses to talk about it. It's just kind of this belief that there was a car accident, some of the pedestrians got hit by a car on that bridge. But no directly.
Well, that's in keeping with the state of the Royals anyway. So.
Exactly. Yeah. They've been haunted. I mean, I used to love following the Royals because they had some amazing teams back in the Brett days.
Well, Dan, it's been a very entertaining conversation here with you. I really enjoyed hearing some of these stories and talking about how you you and Mickey tracked down some of these guys and found out more about these stories. And we really just scratched the surface here, folks, because we're talking about two 250-plus page books out there on these great ghost stories and supernatural stories related to baseball. So, as I said, we've just scratched the surface here. There's tons more to discover in Haunted Baseball and Field of Screams. Highly recommend them, and they're perfect companions for the baseball season. So go out and pick them up. And Dan, thank you once again for coming on the program. We'll definitely have you back on the show in the future, probably next year for baseball season, to talk some more about some of these supernatural tales related to baseball.
Oh, thanks, Tim. Appreciate having me on.
That does it for this week's edition of BoA Audio Season 6. Big thanks to Dan Gordon for coming on the show. Check out his websites, hauntedbaseball.com and fieldofscreamsonline.com. And check out the books, of course, Haunted Baseball and Field of Screams. Moving right along now, it's time for BoA Audio listener feedback, and we've got a few different issues in the till, so let's just dive right in. First of all, I want to give a big thanks to Brett, Rick, and Ian, all of whom wrote to me about an issue we're having with the iTunes. Hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've gotten around the problem. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you are. But somehow iTunes is messing up the feed and listing the last two episodes in out of sequence from the rest of BoA Audio. I've looked at it. I've tried to figure it out. I'm hoping it's an issue with iTunes that settles itself soon. If people know how to fix this sort of thing, get in touch with me. I could always use the insight. That's about it, really. So the best advice I can give to people who are listening right now, obviously you're hardcore listeners, you figured out how to get the show, but the best advice, really, I should post this somewhere where people can actually read it, is always to check with BoA Audio first. I don't trust iTunes, I don't even like it, but we use it because we have to. Preferably, I would like it if people just grabbed the show right from BinallofAmerica.com, because that way I know for sure it is there. Nonetheless, we got to fix this iTunes issue, so shoot me a line, somebody, if you know how to fix it. I'm going to keep looking at it and trying to figure it out. Hopefully we'll get to the bottom of it this week when we put out this episode and the baseball special. That's part one of listener feedback. Part two is a guest suggestion. Comes from Mark, no hometown listed. He says, I don't know if you heard, but just a few days back, Lloyd Pye unveiled some new information about the DNA of the Star Child skull. I think that he would make a good guest. Signed, Mark, no hometown listed. Thank you for writing in, Mark. I'm well aware of Lloyd Pye and the Star Child skull story. Part of me feels like I've heard it all already, but then a part of me now, when I think about it, doesn't know really anything about the Star Child skull. And since we're sort of delving into the peripheral of the esoteric this season, there's a good chance I will investigate the Star Child skull. Just because I don't believe in it necessarily doesn't mean it's not a topic we can explore here on the program. And I may end up coming around on this Star Child thing once I look into it a little further. So, very good suggestion, Mark. I like this one, since it is right on the fringes of the paranormal. The third and final email this week is sort of an odd one. Kind of one of those emails I wanted to share as an example of the strange communiques that get sent my way here as the man behind BoA Audio. A very weird one. It is a guest solicitation from someone who wants to be a guest on the program, and just something I really just was blown away by and sort of stuck into the file here. It comes from Ludmila Kozakova in the Czech Republic, and here's what she has to say. My name is Ludmila Kozakova. On my website, A Window into Space, you can get basic or even scientific information, according to the level of your knowledge and understanding, about the high galaxy civilizations. You can even communicate with the beings who broadcast. As people usually need my help with activating the crystal, it can happen that you will not see, but for sure, you will feel energies which don't come from this world. The civilization, entry point Andromeda, is ready to create a signal language and start an official communication. Best regards, Ludmila Kozakova. And the website here for Ludmila, I'll be fair, I'll list it here so folks can check out her communiques with the other beings. The website is www.amezdas.cz, and that's spelled AMEZDAS.CZ. So there you go. A Window into Space, Ludmila Kozakova. I don't know what to do with that. I don't know how I would even explore that, or even if I would want to. Czech Republic, that's far away in and of itself. I'm very skeptical of channelings. I'm just completely blown away by this one. So, wanted to share it because it was like, wow, you think you get weird emails. This is a strange one. And the perfect one to use to close up the BoA audio listener feedback for this week's edition of the program. Big thanks once again to Brett, Rick, and Ian for bringing the iTunes issue to my attention, Mark for the Lloyd Pye guest suggestion, and Ludmila Kozakova for getting in touch with us and getting our attention here on her communications with the high galaxy civilizations. If you'd like to be a part of future editions of BoA Audio Listener Feedback, here are the means to do it. You can write to boaaudio@hotmail.com or go to banalofamerica.com, BINNALL of America.com, and click the contact button. And the final method is a little bit more interactive. It is, of course, the official BoA forum, theusofe.com, THEUSOFE.com. Check it out. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook, so follow me, befriend me, or poke me. It's all good, and I'd love to hear from you on there. Up next, it is the thanks portion of the program, so allow me to tip my cap and offer sincere thanks to the outstanding and esteemed BoA staff. Leslie, Chiron, Regan Lee, Joe V, Tina Senna, Rochelle Hawks, Richard Thomas, Marla Pena, our contributing cartoonist Andy Carolyn, and our newest columnists Bruce Priddy and Tony Morrill, and, of course, our webmaster Jeremy Boston. That's quite a staff. That has grown in the last few weeks, and if you look at what's going on at BoA, you'll see that the content has grown quite a bit. I'm trying to be more diligent about getting these columns posted. The BoA staff is contributing tons and tons of stuff all the time. It's getting hard for me to keep up with them, and you'll see that if you head over to BoA. We've got an all-new Gray Matters, an all-new Paranormal Apostate, an all-new Esotericana, and an all-new Fortean Ramblings, plus an all-new Medusa's Ladder. So just jam-packed with stuff and more on the way from the BoA staff. They're doing amazing work, folks. We say it week in and week out, but it is the truth, my friends. If you're only listening to BoA audio and you're not reading the columns at Banal of America, then you're only getting half of the story. BoA, make it a part of your everyday search for esoteric news and opinion. Now, normally this is the part of the program where I turn to you and ask you to make a donation to BoA and or BoA audio. But this time around, I want to talk a little bit about a big project that I'm working on with my buddy Paul Kimball of Red Star Films. And this is an actual film that we're trying to put together called Beyond Best Evidence, the UFO Enigma. You're going to be hearing more about this in the weeks and months to come here on BoA Audio, because I am really backing this project in a big way. It is going to be crowdsourced. It's going to be funded by people out there like you, listeners and supporters of the esoteric arts, if you will. So, instead of asking to make a donation to Banal of America or BoA, please, this time around, think about making a donation to Beyond Best Evidence, the UFO Enigma. You can find links to that at Banal of America, or just go to indiegogo.com/UFO, indiegogo.com/UFO. No donation is too small, and this time around, all donations come with a whole bunch of different extra bonuses and stuff like that. It's hard for me to explain here, but they're quite elaborate, and the higher you go in a donation, the more perks you get from Paul and I as we make this film. Beyond Best Evidence, the UFO Enigma. As I said, we're going to talk about it a lot more in the weeks and months to come here on BoA Audio. Paul Kimball will be on the BoA Audio Baseball Special in a few short days, and he'll be talking about it there as well. So for right now, just head on over to indiegogo.com/UFO or go to Banal of America and click the link, and that'll get you all the info you need on this exciting project from BoA and Red Star Films. Instead of next week on the program, allow me to say, coming to you later on this week, it is the 2011 BoA Audio Baseball Special, easily the lowest rated edition of the program each season, but we're going to keep doing it as long as there is a BoA Audio. Thankfully, there's a lot of folks out there who do tune in, and you're going to be excited about this year's installment, I'm sure. We've got the usual suspects: Lauren Coleman, Jason Offutt, Adam Go Rightly, Paul Kimball, and Greg Bishop. Tried to track down Rich Dolan, but didn't get a chance to. He's been traveling around a whole bunch of places this year, and it's been hard to pin him down, and I've been just super crazy, as all you folks out there know. So we didn't get Rich Dolan on the program this year. We'll try and get him back on for the 2012 BoA Audio Baseball Special. Plus, we're going to welcome the winner of the BoA Forum's baseball prediction contest. He goes by the name of League Minimum, but in the everyday world, his name is Greg, and he'll be on the show to represent the BoA listeners on the BoA Audio Baseball Special. Overall, obviously, it is a lot of fun. It is a lot of laughs. It is a lot of laid-back, sort of behind-the-scenes discussion with a whole bunch of folks in the world of esoterica. So if you like that sort of thing, tune in and just get a feel for what it's like when we're hanging at the bar. Now, I know some folks aren't going to tune into the baseball special, so allow me to quickly plug the episode coming up to you next week, and we're going to be trying real hard to get it to you next week. By popular demand, we're welcoming back Tracy Twyman to BoA Audio for an in-depth discussion of the economy and also how it relates strangely and chillingly to alchemy. This is one you're definitely going to want to check out. Very creepy stuff, very enlightening stuff, very lengthy conversation with Tracy Twyman. That's coming at you hopefully around April 17th or 18th. So tune in to BoA to get your hands on that. And on that note, I'm getting mush mouth, so let's wrap this up, folks. That does it for this installment of BoA Audio. Thank you once again to Dan Gordon. Thanks for all the folks out there who contributed to listener feedback. And obviously, big thanks to the hardcore BoA Audio listeners out there listening to me right now. You guys are the best. I'm very excited to see the spring beginning, and I'm feeling really recharged lately, my friends, and I'm looking forward to what we have coming at you in the weeks and months to come, and all that is thanks to your support. Thank you for making BoA Audio a part of your esoteric audio playlist. Until next time, this is Tim Banal, thanking you for listening and signing off.